I was asked by UNDP Montenegro to conduct an evaluation of their social inclusion and gender equality program to help inform some of the decisions that need to be made for the next 5-year country program, as well as to give feedback on some of the specific approaches and sort of strategies that the program has been using over the past 5 years. One of the people I interviewed said to me, "Oh, your job is going to be so easy, you're so good." And you know what? She was right. Basically, what I found is that overall, the program is highly strategic in terms of the kinds of inputs, the kinds of activities it supports, very well organized, and providing very, very timely inputs of both human and financial resources where the support is needed. One of the key success factors that stood out in this whole process for me was the inclusion of people from particularly vulnerable groups in project decision making and in consultation processes. Partly as a result of this, there was a strong feedback about the UNDP, people saying that it was a very good level of cooperation, excellent communication, and the partners were extremely happy to be working with UNDP. They felt that it was a very collaborative relationship in which a lot of trust had been established, and this is regardless of whether they were working with the Roma communities to very senior government officials. So it was a very consistent finding across the board. The other thing that came across was that UNDP's selection of its national partners, particularly with NGOs, because obviously when you're working with national partners that are governmental, you don't have a choice, you have to work with what's there. But the national NGO selection was very good, very appropriate, which was important because sometimes you're working in a context here, given us that it's a small country, that there are not necessarily lots to choose from. So who you choose as a partner takes some time. And they've worked very closely with those partners to build their capacity to the point where some of them are now ready to take over full implementation of the social inclusion programming. The other thing that came across through several different stakeholder interviews was the large amount of support that the country program has gotten for social inclusion from the Bratislava Regional Center, as well as working in collaboration with other country offices in the region, particularly the Croatian country office of the UNDP in collaboration on the development of the National Human Development Report, which focused on social inclusion. And what people talked about in terms of that report that stood out was that it really put social inclusion on the map in Montenegro, and that people are much more aware as a result of that. And it involved a huge, I think, collaborative effort to make it happen. And again, working with a local partner to implement and collect the data and analyze the data. One of the challenges that the UNDP faces, though, is that sometimes there's a little bit of a tension between what local organizations think is their capacity and what UNDP thinks is their capacity, and they need to be, so I guess they've been working on negotiating on meeting in the middle on that one, and UNDP's provided fairly strong capacity development support for different types of organizations, ranging from government to NGOs. So overall, what we found with social inclusion is that the program is perceived very, very well by partners. There are some very significant results in very specific aspects of the program. I'm not going to go into those now because you can read that in the report, which will be much longer than this little talk. So overall, in terms of social inclusion, things were considered to be very, very positive. When we moved to the gender equality section of the evaluation, found a very similar kind of finding with a slight difference. What we found was that in general, the gender equality program was extremely strategic in its support. It had very flexible funding mechanisms, which the government in particular really appreciated, and made it possible to be to be responsive. And they did a huge amount with very little money. Unlike the social inclusion program, until very recently, it didn't have a project to fund it, so it was using money from the track budget of UNDP, which indicated a very strong commitment on the side of the country office here to pull in money from its track funding to cover that. And partly through those efforts, they've been able to obtain funding from the European Commission, which will be a much larger program, which can then build on some of the successes of that particular program, which have been the development of a gender equality law and national action plan on the gender equality law and the development of a law on domestic violence. But that being said, there are many other there are many positive features and results that have come out of this whole process. Perhaps the biggest challenge that I found in the whole sort of evaluation process is, while social inclusion as a concept is now fairly well accepted amongst the different partners, gender equality as a challenge is not to the same degree. Partly there's an understanding or a perception that gender equality is not an issue in Montenegro because there are equal laws for men and women, but they're actually how those laws are implemented and whether people have access to them in the same way is not as clear. What came through very clearly in the whole evaluation process is that UNDP has been acting in a fairly strong facilitator or broker role to bring together all the different actors in the different processes related to social inclusion and gender equality. So this means, for example, during the development of the gender equality law or action plan, there was consultations with women's organizations, and they would like that process to continue because they felt it was very positive, and they're waiting to be continue for that consultation to continue, and also to, as I said earlier, to help identify which organizations, particularly NGOs, could play a strong role in terms of implementing different kinds of programming, as well as ensuring that there is room for everybody, so that there's a space for new NGOs to come into the circle, if you want to call it, as well as drawing upon the experience of NGOs that are well established and national partners that have worked in this area before, and to continue their advocacy work, because also, as was the case in social inclusion, the national partners were extremely appreciative of the support that they've gotten from the UNDP, felt it was very, very timely and a great success. I've worked with quite a few UNDP offices, and I can only concur with their conclusion that there's a very, very strong level of cooperation here, and the program is to be congratulated, as are all the staff and the different partners involved.